All right, thanks everybody for getting on to today's office hours. The topic today is going to be around how to deploy VOLTTRON in a more repeatable and packaged way using Ansible. It could also be a discussion of Docker. The Ansible service is something that's been in VOLTTRON for a bit, but last time we presented it, there wasn't a worked example. Now we've been using it on our campus and have more experience with it. And so Ben is going to kick off that discussion. We'd love to hear from everybody on the call, if they're familiar with these technologies or if they have use cases they think would fit using Ansible or Docker, or how they're handling the deployment of VOLTTRON or other technologies. And I think that'd be a great discussion. And so with that, Ben, are you ready to go?
Yeah, just a little slow on all the buttons.
No problem. All right, I'll turn it over to Ben.
Let's see. The right thing to share is Zoom is doing a different thing. Why is Zoom doing a different thing?
Having issues?
I think it's just confused about which screen.
Okay.
Oh, because it's Zoom Gov and it doesn't think it has right permissions. I may have to drop and rejoin after I allow this. I will be right back.
Okay. Fun with technology. Let's see, while we're waiting for Ben to come back, I'll just let everybody know that we have sent out a couple surveys. One about the user meeting, and we are looking at doing that virtually. It seems like the consensus timeframe for people who have replied to the survey is June, July. If you haven't had a chance to reply to that survey, please do. We'd really appreciate learning more about what people's time preferences are and topics. If you don't have that, the link to the survey, let me know, and I will send that to you. Thanks for those who did reply. And then another survey that has gone out recently was around was a security survey to try and understand what security concerns and postures the community has. And that's another one where it would be, the more use cases we get back and more examples we have, the better that is. So again, if you don't have that link and need it resent, just let me know. I'd be happy to send it out. And appreciate those who've replied, and looking forward to additional responses because it's all great info to have. All right.
Am I showing something?
I see your desktop with the Ansible and VOLTTRON slide deck.
Cool. Gotta love constantly resetting permissions.
Yeah.
Let's see. Is that a legible size for people? I guess it didn't actually full screen.
Okay. It's full screen enough.
Okay, I'm just going to plow ahead then. So this is largely going to overlap with the office hours presentation, at least at the beginning, that I gave, I think about 9 months ago. But as Jeremy said, in the meantime, we've been using it with our campus system. And so there's some lessons learned there. And also just, I am hopeful that this example will be more relatable since it's based on our campus and not some VMs kind of invented for the purposes of doing the initial tooling of this system. So to kind of start still at the beginning, why would you use Ansible? For those who are not familiar with it or maybe haven't visited it in a while, it's a Python-based tool which is open source, and it's really for automating configuration management of remote systems. Normally Linux, but basically anything you can SSH into can be managed. It's got a pretty big community, and it's backed by Red Hat, so that's it's nice that it's not just some small side project somewhere. It's specifically designed for handling large numbers of systems, dealing with logical groupings within them, but also distinctions amongst those systems, and evolving sets of systems. So if you need to add new platforms, add new hosts, or take them away, it's designed to be able to deal with that. And specifically to provide a nice way to kind of keep everything you have deployed in a nice, well-aligned and known state as it evolves. It's built around, it's really built around this very declarative system where you say the state that you want, and then the implemented components are supposed to take you from kind of whatever the state is now to the declared desired state. So that's a distinction from kind of a more kind of writing your own script sort of approach, where you have a kind of procedural imperative design that it goes and runs a command, but it's less oriented around making sure you achieve the desired state and more around doing a sequence of actions. So that's Ansible itself. That's the external tool that's not part of VOLTTRON but is used by it. And so there's a couple different ways that this tool could be useful to us in this community. The first is still kind of aside from VOLTTRON, it's just a convenient way to keep a growing fleet of systems maintained in a constant way. This is like your normal systems admin tasks, whether it's maintaining compliance, doing security updates, kind of whatever you need to do. We've built tooling specifically to try and make it easier to use this system to install VOLTTRON itself, the platform, as well as installing your agents into some fleet of instances. It's also nice for situations where maybe you need to add a new unit to your set, or pull one down or replace it in the event of hardware failure, disk failure, whatever, in whatever kind of system you have. And basically getting back to the desired state after you've changed something. So how I want to kind of quickly get into, though, what this looks like in practice. So on the campus, we've been using Ansible for a few different kind of scenarios. So one that's actually come up pretty recently is like I was saying, for systems admin tasks that are kind of separate from VOLTTRON. We use the same inventory components that we would build for the VOLTTRON management. For example, recently, to make sure that all of our campus boards are using a common configuration for their time synchronization. We were seeing a little bit of time drift and realized that somewhere along the way we had missed a board or forgot to enable the appropriate system to unit, whatever it was. And what was nice is I was able to go to one board that was working, find the desired set of configurations, put that into Ansible, and then say, okay, make sure all of my boards are following the same config, kind of regardless of where they are now. We also used it for a couple of buildings to do the upgrade to VOLTTRON 7. So this was related to the move to Python 3. That was pretty early, and so we didn't use it for all of our campus boards. We're still working on getting everything merged into the system, but we were able to use it on a couple of systems and to see that working. And then something we've been using, kind of partially using recently even too, is a use case where, in item 2, I was using the playbooks that are included in the VOLTTRON Ansible repo that's available and up on GitHub right now. The other common use case that I had anticipated might be useful, kind of broader to the community, is that the playbooks that are made available are built out of smaller components that Ansible calls roles and modules. And those are for doing kind of smaller, more atomic tasks. And because those are available, it provides a way for you to define your own kind of site or deployment specific procedures or state definitions without having to do all of the tooling. So for example, I built a custom little piece that will install and update a single agent so that you can use it if you're kind of doing a more ad hoc live thing. You need to install a new agent or update the configuration. You don't want to touch the others. That's there. We've been using it for going to all of our remote boards and setting the forwarders to cache only mode so that we can take our central instance down or perform maintenance or testing there and know that we're caching all of the data from our buildings so that once VC is back up, we still collect all that data. It's also kind of only adjacent to the VOLTTRON specific pieces, but also a playbook which will go onto each of the buildings and take a tarball snapshot of the VOLTTRON home and root directories, tar that up, pull it back to whatever central location so that you can back up all of those files and configurations before you do some task at some risk level so that you'll have confidence that you can restore from that if you botch something along the way. So what I really wanted to show is here. So this is where I start to kind of deviate from the more contrived example that I showed last time. And this is kind of an example, well, it's a trimmed down version of some directories in an actual Git repo where we're managing the deployed state of our campus buildings. So we've got a single file here at the top, which is the inventory. This is an Ansible concept where you define what hosts you might connect to and what the unique features are of those. I'll talk about that a little more in a moment. And then you have directories related to those buildings where you can contain your configuration related to VOLTTRON. So that can be the configuration of the platform itself, but also the config files, the full set of config files that configure the agents there. So here, kind of a very abridged version of the config store for a platform driver, for example, where we've converted the topic path into a directory structure. And so for some large building, maybe you have a large number of air handling units, maybe some VAVs or other objects in your config store. And this makes it kind of easier for a human to navigate and update those changes if they need to. It's a navigable structure, and it makes it a little easier to keep track of versioning when it's not just one file that's constantly changing. And then the system will parse all of this structure, deploy, if you have local changes, deploy them onto your remote board, and then update the configuration. So did I cover all of this? Yes. So to talk a little bit more about the inventory, this is pretty similar to what was shown in the actual tutorial that's on Read the Docs and that was shown last time, where an inventory file as defined by Ansible, you define some list of hosts. They have variables that are specific to each of them, for example, the IP. And then you can also have configuration that's shared across them. So here I've got some variables that are assigned to all of the hosts. I say I want the VOLTTRON home to be named VOLTTRON_home. And then you can override that. So this one on VC is going to take precedence and use this different naming pattern. This is still contrived. This isn't really what we're doing, but it shows that if you have a case that needs to be special for whatever reason, you can override it like that. Similarly, for most buildings, we want to install the drivers feature when we do the bootstrapping step for VOLTTRON. But for VC, where we're actually connecting to some historians, we don't need drivers, but we do need the tooling to be able to talk to various databases. So this file can grow a bit as you add buildings. You can also use groups to define subsets. So if you have multiple campuses or sets of buildings that are unique in some way, you can define groups either to change just the configuration relevant to those groups, or to make it convenient to say, I want to update all of my West Campus buildings or all of my East Campus buildings. You can define them in groups, and then Ansible will allow you to run playbooks that target specific groups. Looking a bit at, if I go back first to the structure. So for each of the buildings, we have a corresponding configuration file for the building itself. And so if we look inside that, there's a couple of components. This is all part of what's documented in the roles that we defined in the VOLTTRON Ansible repo. So first we have a config that's specific to the platform itself. So for example, here we're setting the message bus to use Rabbit, the RMQ here. And then we have the list of agents that we want to be installed on this same platform. We want to use a backnet proxy so we can talk to backnet devices. We're going to run a platform driver with the config store following that big tree I showed on the prior slide. We want these agents to both be enabled, and we want them to both be running. And we specify the file name for the configuration for each of them. And then in the case of the platform driver, the location of the configuration store as well. And so that's referencing these files in this configs directory, the backnet proxy, and the I guess there's a forwarder that's off the screen on the other one, in the platform driver. So what's nice here is if you say, oh, I need a listener because I want to go debug something, you could add that into this inventory for whatever particular system you want and deploy it either on a single platform, or you could go put that in each of your systems, and the same Ansible script will go and install it on all of your remote systems. So unfortunately, our campus is in a state where I can't go run commands and show you kind of running those deployments right now. So it's kind of just looking at the config files and a promise that with one Ansible command, you will go apply kind of the state as written onto those systems. You can see the video on the recording from that old office hours. Maybe we should, I don't know if that link is easy to find, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll track it down.
The recordings of those. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about is kind of where we're looking at going with this. These are bullets that I wrote late last night and didn't run by anyone, so that's just a disclaimer. These are not formally scheduled, but I really think the kind of top priority is to hear back from the community about the tools that exist so far, the playbooks and roles that we've written. We haven't, or at least I haven't really heard of any cases where people are using the tools that we've put up. There are a few people who've said they've worked on or considered working on some of their own tools. So I guess one question is there something about what's been done that's making them hard to adopt? Is it an issue of awareness, or does it not really do what people need?
Hey, this all looks good to me. I just haven't had time. I need to build this to basically deploy to 4 different instances for a microgrid. Haven't had time, but I'm planning to test this fully and use this Ansible platform. I mean, it looks like the best way. What I'd really love is like Ansible multi-site plus automated, well, from Bitbucket for us, not GitHub, but plus it coming straight from our repo. So I could just go, this is what I want on them, you know? That's like dream for like maybe a couple of years in the future. I understand there was some GitHub push thing that Shweta wrote about in the release. So I got to look into that and see if I can pivot that to Bitbucket because we use Atlassian. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to give this a go.
Great. I will say, so we haven't explored it at least yet, but there's an open source tool called, well, the fully open source version is called AWX, but that's kind of the upstream for the Ansible Tower product, which is a Red Hat subscription-based kind of product, I think, but it can be self-hosted, that I think enables GitOps that kind of work the way you described. Like I said, I haven't actually deployed it myself.
Okay.
But Ansible Tower will let you schedule running Ansible playbooks against whatever inventory you have, either on schedules, or I would imagine, I would expect that it would tie into Bitbucket, but I haven't done that myself.
Yeah, this is because like I literally will change control algorithms, multi-agent systems for power type control. So I'm going to be changing the algorithms like who knows how many times a day once I get the system deployed. So hence me trying to get, I always try to like work on innovating to make the deployment and test process super quick, because if you're going to do it 20 times a day, if you can save half an hour 20 times a day, that's a lot of time. Yeah. It's longer than the day. Yeah, so I will take a look at this pretty soon and try to work through and give feedback.
Is this the stuff that's in the VOLTTRON-Ansible repo? Sorry, I'm late.
Yes.
Yeah, so
That's right.
Chris, it's pretty trivial. They've got this like Git VOLTTRON source here. There's actually they have the from GitHub, but that's for a tarball. You can actually replace that, or maybe even make like a if statement that takes a flag from the command line that you can point to basically any Git repo, and use the Git module instead of the copy module. And that's actually how I use Ansible with VOLTTRON, is I get it straight from a Git repo.
Okay.
So then you could, it's up to you to like figure out how to fire off that task from a commit if that's what you're really trying to get to. But yeah, you can do it with Ansible for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thought I had was that's the which I had committed to too. I really want to do, which was the interlinked agent. I call it the agent that kind of reinstalls itself. That's from Blade Runner test, interlinked. But like that's the kind of mentality of that agent, is like just generically with no attention, just totally deletes itself and reinstalls itself. So I thought that could be internal to the agent, but it sounds like within this structure, maybe it's better that there's some kind of supervisor.
We have another we call it a health monitoring agent that is going to be plug and play to allow you to extend and add whatever capabilities you want. So if you have some message or look for some trigger, and then you could have it do that reinstall process if you wanted to, just inline reinstall.
Yeah, I've looked into this. These guys that have Python things, they look at like the hash or the version of that repo and then compare that to the local. And then there's some guys online that have done kind of this stuff on some repos. We could use that.
Some people
health
with
agent.
Kubernetes have used like a Git flow style thing. That's one of the things that we're looking at attempting on our campus, that the way you deploy stuff is you push to the repo and then you have something that does the monitoring of the differences and do that. It wouldn't be inside the VOLTTRON necessarily, or it could be, I don't know. But it's just something to kick off our Ansible deployment or a Docker-based system. I don't.
So for
we're
me,
still thinking.
For me, where it's different is like mine would definitely be the dev version of that, where like, as I said, I want to push that 20 times a day.
Sure.
And my system will break, but I imagine that if we wanted to architect this correctly, we'd need like a test and then a dev, which is similar to how they build the cloud stuff here.
Sure.
Because you guys with the campus, I mean, you probably wouldn't want to do the kind of stuff that I'm going to push. You'd probably want to test.
We broke stuff yesterday on ours by not updating anything. So we're trying to deal with that.
The other nice thing about the Ansible Git module is because like the modules in Ansible attempt to deliver idempotent functionality, it will actually check the hash on the Git repo and not overwrite if it's not updated.
Yeah. A nice thing I will say my intuition is that in most cases you would rather kind of push out kind of well-defined updates triggered on, you commit your update to some agent and then you push that update to whatever set of platforms 20 times a day. If you've got a thing that's pulling and updating itself, that might be good enough in dev. It does mean that it's harder to go look and say, okay, I know when I push the commit that changed me to some other version.
Yeah.
If I'm just pulling latest all the time.
No, you're right. In that kind of bare metal dev, maybe you want to be pushing it yourself, like you said, because then what if the auto updater doesn't work properly and then you're not looking at the correct solution to the problem? So, yeah, I don't have
doesn't work.
Sorry?
What? Doesn't work? Come on.
Yeah. I'm just saying you've got more sources of error, which you want to minimize. So,
Right.
yeah.
And it's nice too, the declarative version gives you a way to roll back. So if you push it out and say, I want to run on my new hash or my new branch or whatever, it breaks and you say, okay, go back to develop or go back to main or whatever.
Yeah, go back to the latest stable so that I can do stuff.
You can break it during the day and then roll it back to the one that was working while you're home sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So regarding the things that we are looking for from, we need to get community-based feedback is to understand different use cases for automated deployment. And Nancy, if you're here and if you're comfortable, can you explain a little bit about your deployment scenario? We're just trying to gather different types of deployment scenarios. I remember you saying that it's containerized deployment, and what do you expect from the VOLTTRON team and how we can support it? Can you give some thoughts on that?
Sure, Shilpa. Hi, everyone. This is Nancy here. So actually, Chris, I just wanted to add one a quick comment on what you were trying to do with linking it with Bitbucket. You could definitely build like DevOps CI/CD pipelines and have those so that whenever you have a pull request or something like that, it triggers a new build. That could be a way that you can also deploy over into your microgrid as just a potential solution. But in terms of what we're looking for, exactly what Shota is saying. So, what we're trying to do is really be able to, when we're doing our testing, deploy it across different types of bare metal solutions. So thinking about, the VOLTTRON Docker, if we can deploy it onto, some type of device, but also onto single board computers. So I'm not quite sure if that's something that's currently supported with the VOLTTRON Dockers, and I'd be happy to kind of hear if that is something that's in the plans as well.
When you say that, do you mean like cross-compiling, or I forget the term for it. It's not really cross-compiling, but building an image from one architecture for a different architecture in the build system?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. So you could use something like BuildX, but I was thinking ideally that there would be kind of a golden standard Docker image for single board computers.
I think that's hard because they're actually different architectures, right?
Yeah, but you could just have a Docker image that is like PNNL stamped that said, "Hey, we approve of this Docker image for Pies," or something like that.
For each single board computer, whether it's like ARM7, ARM8, ARM64, whatever.
You could define, right, like which ones you would support out of the box and then which ones you don't support. And I think that could be something that the community could say, hey, this one's, one that's more prevalently used by the community. These are the ones that we're likely going to be supporting.
We can certainly support one as an example, and then you guys can extend it for others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that could be a place where the community could contribute those back, right?
Yeah.
Build up a library of those.
We tried to build up some tooling around this. It was probably a little over, it may have been 2 years ago now. I think that either predated BuildX as a feature, or or it was new enough that we weren't aware of it. And so the Docker tooling that we built was kind of bending over backwards to do the emulation to get the different architectures built and assemble a manifest that did exactly this sort of thing, where it would reference ARMs, various ARM versions, x86, etc. BuildX makes that a lot easier to deal with. And the other challenge, I think, and this is true in Ansible too, is VOLTTRON is really built to try and deal very carefully with managing state in a way that's not entirely consistent with how kind of you normally expect Docker to want to do that sort of stuff, and Ansible too, because in a lot of other systems that are more native to those, the applications are kind of not managing their own state so much. They are consuming the state that you hand them. And so it's an interesting question of how we can build up to use these tools while not breaking use cases that people might be depending on for kind of dynamic state management in their platforms.
Yeah. I guess, do you want to do it? I mean, I guess I've read there's all these systems where it's like, yeah, they deploy that base image, that base Linux as well. Is VOLTTRON that? I didn't think VOLTTRON was that. I thought VOLTTRON was software that ran on a base image. I wonder if there's a way to kind of partner with some technology, partner with a technology provider, or choose a technology provider that's kind of handling the operating system rather than reaching out and taking that burden on. Is that what VOLTTRON wants to be, or that's my question?
Well, yeah, I think, well, there's a distinction between what VOLTTRON wants to be and what PNNL can develop as part of that, right? Because we're a research organization, so at some point there's things where it doesn't make sense for us to do. But the VOLTTRON community as a whole, I think definitely there would be a place for that. So yeah, so that's definitely something to think about. Yeah, and if you have any, we could take this conversation to email if you have some more thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Chris's question as being sort of an existential thing to be addressed here. And my vote always is like, focus on the core capabilities. Don't try to be all things to everybody, because like as good as your team is, like you're not going to recreate Kubernetes if somebody really wants Kubernetes, and you shouldn't.
Yeah,
Kubernetes
exactly.
Is Kubernetes. Let Kubernetes be Kubernetes. If they need to run it at that scalable level, then like somebody needs to learn how to use Kubernetes. You don't need to be like VOLTTRON doesn't need to either reinvent or assimilate Kubernetes and have like that use case. There's just minimal value to the broader community of that, when the reality is to run Kubernetes, you need someone who's a Kubernetes expert. So you're going to have to make that investment anyway. So you're just going to let people shoot themselves in the foot if you try to help them get started doing something that is going to be really painful in the long run.
Well, it's a business prop. So I can see how like maybe support one image, that'd be cool. Allow developers to have that, we can start quick. Here's an image from the development team. We can start quick. But once you go larger than that to support multiple OSs on multiple hardware, it just becomes a different business proposition. It becomes a business proposition where, like us as a large solar manufacturer, we would be using robust technology. I severely doubt that we would use things that weren't entirely robust. And then obviously if you're deploying securely, there's all the security side of like what you're doing there. And I mean, will companies do that in-house? Probably. But yeah, I think supporting one image would be cool to start with people, but I think, is it out of scope for VOLTTRON? I don't know. I don't think we need to figure out how we're going to do that. There'll be like whole teams at our company that like really know how to do that. But for us, I guess that'd be outside our multi-agent system spec.
Right.
I think there's maybe a question of like a minimal investment too, because, you know, I use Kubernetes a lot in other scenarios, but I'm not trying to support everyone's Kubernetes-based VOLTTRON deployment tomorrow. But are there ways that we could make VOLTTRON easier to deploy in those environments for a company that is investing in having their Kubernetes guy or girl, but you know, their Kubernetes person who can say, okay, you've got an application that knows how to handle state in a way that containers and Docker knows about. I can build the tooling that deals with my rolling updates and my config maps and all of my Kubernetes jargon, because your application consumes state in the way I expect and caches state in the way I expect, and follows patterns that we know how to deal with.
I think that's the right way to think about it, is make sure it plugs in really well with the predominant business cases that people have.
Yeah, and that's kind of the pattern that we've followed for things like this is, you know, provide services that people can then build a UI on top of. I'm not going to build everybody's UI sort of thing, or you know, build out the driver framework, but we're not going to build every single proprietary driver sort of thing. So I think that, yeah, making it so that it can be used more easily and fit that use case, I think that does make a lot of sense.
I had a question. What was the CSCI thing? Like, what does that stand for? I'm like kind of a microgrids control guy, so I get lost when we get to stuff. What with the auto deployment? There was a term, CICD.
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 So that's continuous integration and continuous delivery.
Okay.
Deployment.
That's probably the Google keyword you've been looking for, Chris, for what you want to build.
Yeah.
Honestly, like if you Google like IoT CI/CD, that you're gonna like find 100 different patterns that are gonna allow you to do what you want to do.
That all boils down to the same thing.
They'll all be wrong, but
yeah, right.
Oh wait, here's one from Microsoft. I bet that's going to be good.
They actually do this pretty well. I mean,
they have some good pipelining.
Their stuff is way better than Amazon's stuff in this space, I think.
Oh really? For IoT, they've come hard into the IoT, aren't they? I'm not a Microsoft lover. Hate Windows. But yeah, they have come hard in the IoT, haven't they? Wow. All right. Yeah, this looks cool. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Ben, do you have some initial thoughts on building tooling capability around automating keys for multiple platform deployment? Want to discuss that here?
Sure. So that's kind of this third bullet, and it's kind of the elephant in the room of the thing that hasn't been done with the recipes. Is you know, the system right now will go stand up N platforms and be very happy to do it, but doing the key management so that they can actually connect to each other is not there. I was partially we just wanted to get an initial feature set out so that people could start working with it, but then also I think it was Spencer was working on in for 8 the some retooling around this to help you automate adding those keys. And so I haven't looked in enough detail if that tool could be leveraged. But the nice
for
that would be the web
RMQ
endpoint
or ZMQ or both.
Doesn't matter.
any all.
Oh no, it would be ZMQ. Sorry.
But
What do you do for RMQ currently with I mean I just
No,
have not dug into
we'll
your
start
answers.
off with ZMQ and then extend it for RMQ. For ZMQ, previously, if it's a remote agent connecting, an agent connecting to a remote platform, you just add the public key of forwarder onto the
I mean,
remote agent,
if
right?
you're going to support like if the idea is this is usable for robust deployments, then like for our like this is separate. I think these are separate use cases, RMQ versus ZMQ. But for RMQ, like there are standard modules in place for like setting up an easy RSA infrastructure where you would just like one of the things that would happen is deploying and building a CA, and then everything gets keys from that CA instead of using VOLTTRON to like create its own CA, and then the whole platform would all be all the platforms would be off together via a shared CA.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea because Easy RSA is open source and it's very easy to use as well.
And there's already
We'll have
Ansible
to
modules for it, so like you don't even have to do a bunch of like, yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
agree, but that would mean that we'll have to change a bit of Voltron implementation to take an external CA.
Is
Right
it
now
not?
no, right now we are using
Oh,
ourselves.
gross.
Yeah, we'll have to change. It's not a big deal.
Because like, what if somebody wanted to use publicly, traceable certificates? They just don't have that option currently. They
I'm
can only you have to sign the like you have to generate a CA in Voltron, then do a
I'm sorry, I
CSR.
take it back. I'm sorry, I take it
Yeah,
back.
you can specify a path to it.
I think in the Voltron control command, we have a prompt to pass in the CA. I'm sorry, I take it back. Yeah.
Yeah. That would make a lot of sense to me. And then on the ZMQ thing, like what I've done in the past for ZMQ with Ansible is I wrote a play that will capture the platform key. So you can basically run that against a remote host, and then it'll return that variable as a fact. You can even
Yeah, that's the way I wrote it originally too.
Yeah, you can actually write it as like a custom fax module that will always pull if it's available.
That's getting the remote server key, but how do you bless the agent connecting to the remote platform?
You take the fact and update the auths file with the host key you gathered in the fact.
So what I would do is what I used to do. So is like for edge nodes, that playbook there was always a play at the beginning of that playbook that would go look up the VOLTTRON central host key, and then at the end of that playbook, after it set up the edge node, it would capture the key from the I think maybe on the agent install it would capture the key for like the forward historian and go back, and there would be a follow-up play that would install that forward historian key into the so you basically just need the ability to tag a host as like, which I don't know if there's probably a better, more general way to do that. I'm not advocating for that particular path, but there are ways to at least capture those keys into facts that you could then use in other plays.
Yeah, because we made it such that we respond with JSON endpoints, right? So that you can easily do that. Yeah. And that's basically what Spencer's thing does, only it does it as a web-based lookup.
So frankly, on the question of like who's using this or why are you not using it, I built all my own, so I haven't. If I was coming to this again, I would definitely be using this, but it's more pain to like swap out what I'm already doing.
What about on new stuff? Like if you had a different deployment, would you just use what you got?
I mean, that's what I've been. Yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah.
He knows it.
Yeah, he knows it, and he knows it does what he wants it to do.
Right? Yeah, Andrew is like a super user of Voltron. So.
The thing that is really interesting that I've done recently that's pretty cool not that I think this should be something PNNL does or offers, but like I reverted our infrastructure from a push config to pull config, and then got it to where like I have a thumb drive with Ubuntu 20.04 auto install that runs the server, the server 20.04 server install, pulls down the Ansible playbook from a Git repo, runs the Ansible playbook, sets up all of the VOLTTRON stuff, all on the pull side, which is really nice. So I don't know if there's any thought to the pull mode in these playbooks. I mean, mostly I was able to use the playbooks as is. I had to change, I think, a few things in my playbooks to enable pull to work properly, and more about like where the information sources are coming from. But it's really nice to be able to do that. So my setup of a new node is.
Would you be willing to talk
power
through that in a different meeting on how you were able to accomplish that? Or
if I remember.
you remember? Okay.
Can you remote trigger that pull? Because I mean, that would be pretty handy where you just go out to that one instance and say, go for it.
I mean, you can always do that. Yeah. So like, yeah, you can always do that. The thing that was kind of painful, but ultimately works really well, is like building a custom Ubuntu install media that does all that, like takes all these steps and integrates them into Cloud Init and does it for you.
It's impressive. My Ubuntu doesn't even work right now.
It's of limited value for single board computers because most of those expect an OS image, not an install. But because our like heavier duty gateways are all still industrial NUCs, like it works really well for those. And there's some value in doing it that way versus just getting a common image, although I think you could do it either way. Like I could send that image off to an OEM and the Cloud Init would still run on initial boot up, so it would work the same way.
All right. So I think the silence more than 5 seconds is probably means that we're running out of steam here.
Craig, can we double back on that forward historian problem?
Yeah. I was going to say that we should meet up. Do you want to set up a meeting for next week?
Sure.
Or do you want me to set up a meeting for next week? I don't know whose schedule is worse.
Yeah, it's fine. I'll shoot you a link to set up a meeting. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
Well, and just real quick, is that as a fallback sort of thing, Craig? Is this where the health monitor could see that forwarder is in an error state and restart it? Are you doing something?
Yeah, like, I can do that manually for now. There's something broken somewhere that needs to be resolved, though.
There is. I'm not if you're talking on a deployment board, though, if you install this little health monitor thing, whenever that agent turns bad, that's what it keys off of. It will just automatically restart that agent.
Yeah, but I don't really want that happening because the agent's going to be bad as long as the device is offline. So if it's sitting there restarting the forward historian, I'm going to miss data that's published. So I only really want it to happen. I only want something to happen once connectivity is available. I think there's just like, I dug into it today. I looked in the implementation. There's like a to-do cache connection that doesn't look like anything was ever done on. So I don't think that's the problem, but there's some difference in setup historian and the forward historian when the forward historian has not been running, and setup historian when the historian has been running. There's something, and all that is like VIP agent can connect. So I started digging into all that, and I couldn't find anything that should change, but maybe like there are some variables that get set to none that maybe aren't getting set to, I don't know. I dug into it a good bit, but I'm happy to dig into it more.
Let's do that offline next week.
All right, that sounds good.
Craig, and you can invite whoever you want to.
Okay. Well, great. Thanks, everybody. That was a great conversation. We'll definitely make this deployment conversation part of the user meeting, because I think that would be a great follow-up and chance for people to talk about what they're doing and in a larger context and that sort of thing. So definitely looking forward to that. And thanks for all the ideas and suggestions. We'll definitely take those into account and look forward to any more in the future. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See you in a couple weeks.
Bye all.